We have a great guest today.
I know we do. We do. We have the founder of ACEP, David Gruder. And let me tell everybody a little bit about David before we get started. Well, of course, we know him best as having been one of the co-founders of ACEP, which for any of you who are new joining us today, ACEP is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. But today, David is an award-winning, best-selling clinical and organizational development psychologist whose parents, by the way, let him go to Woodstock. We'll have to ask him a little bit about that. I think you were there too, though, Bob, weren't you?
No.
Oh, okay. It was Greg. There's another person that was there. Anyway, he is doing amazing things these days, keynotes, mentoring, helping corporations to bring integrity into the mainstream and making integrity both profitable and practical. So David, if you're ready, please join us. We got a lot to talk to you about.
Well, I'm here and I'm delighted. I've really been looking forward to being with you on this podcast.
Great. Well, we have so many things we want to talk to you about, but let's start with the pre-conference workshop that you're going to be doing this year in May in Baltimore at the ACEP International Conference. And you're calling it Help Your Clients Get Free from Societal/Political Stress and Learned Helplessness. Oh, I love that term, learned helplessness.
Tell us. That's not what's listed on the website, so
good point.
We have to change the name. It's called Resources to Enhance Wellbeing and Social Responsibility, which was a poor title given what Dave was really talking about, which is more about what you just said. So if you come to the website, you'll see that one. But it's really going to be about what David's talking about now.
And let's break the code here and find out. What are you going to be talking about, David?
Well, I'm going to be covering in this intensive a lot of territory, but what it really boils down to is that we have, as all of us know, massive problems today. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently said, a wind of madness is sweeping the globe. And the opportunity here and the problem here is that we as helping professionals have been trained to be non-biased and to keep our noses out of societal stress issues and political divisiveness issues with our clients. And yet our clients are suffering from societal divisiveness and political polarization. They're actually bringing these issues into our therapy offices and our counseling offices, and also with clergy as well and coaches too. And we haven't been trained in how to help clients with these issues in really useful ways. This training provides concrete, practical mindset shifts and psychoeducational training and skills development that helping professionals can provide to their clients to help them deal with these stresses.
So without giving the whole thing away though, David, because this comes up in my practice too, what do you think are some basic keys that we can remember as therapists when somebody does come in affected by these issues?
Well, great question, Paula. You know, the first key is to remember to countermand our training, our programming that says this is off limits. So the first key is to say to ourselves, this is very much on this particular client's mind, and my job is, of course, not to impose my beliefs on my client.
Right.
At the same time, my responsibility to my client is to equip them with the ability to deal with managing the stress this is creating in them, as well as helping them become more empowered in doing something about what's weighing on them in psychologically mature ways.
I love that word empowered, because I think part of the source of the stress is people feel helpless to impact or change the things that are going on, you know, that we're looking at.
Oh, yes. Well, learned helplessness is rampant, absolutely rampant.
I love that term. So explain a little bit more by what you mean about learned helplessness.
Well, sure. You know, learned helplessness was a term that was coined in 1967 by Martin Seligman, who almost all of us in the field know that name, and Stephen Mayer. And what learned helplessness is a state in which an individual or group stops trying to change their circumstances, even when they have the ability to do so. And this abdication of power turns anything other than our own higher selves into being the boss of us.
Very, very interesting. So it's sort of like I've noticed in working with people and talking about other kinds of issues, you know, impacting their health through maybe doing something more like tapping or other things. A lot of people won't make a move until they talk to their doctor. So is that a sort of a form of learned helplessness, that we've learned that they're in charge and we're not?
It is that kind of deferring authority to the professional
Right.
rather than utilizing a professional as a consultant while we remain self-sovereign, as I refer to it,
Uh-huh.
is a form of learned helplessness. Believing that the craziness going on in our society is the boss of our well-being, and that we can't do anything to have positive impact in whatever our chosen spheres of influence happen to be. That's learned helplessness. We have
Yeah.
far more power than we think.
Amen.
So, David, I'm wondering, I know you like practicality, so I'm beginning to imagine what you might be wanting people to learn. And as I'm thinking about it, or just the struggles that I have or thinking about this, where I think you might be going, correct me if I'm wrong, is there might be a series of questions that you ask people, or that therapists, coaches should be able to ask clients to get them to begin to think and not be so absorbed. It's not whether I believe X or I believe Y. I'm on the left or I'm on the right. I'm up, I'm down, I'm blue, I'm red. That's not the point,
No.
and that's what. So the question is, what might be one thing that somebody listening, who's either a therapist or, for that matter, is just, you know, someone out who's struggling with this? What are one or two questions that you would have them do or think about that would begin to restore their sovereignty, if you will?
Mm.
I don't know if that's a fair thing to ask, but
Well, no, I mean, I don't know, you know that I'm not a fan of cookie cutter kinds of things, but as general
no,
guidelines, the kinds of questions to ask clients are things like, how is the current climate in our country and in politics impacting you? And how is it impacting your relationships with your loved ones? How is it impacting your attitude about whether we can create a better world, or whether you think that everything has gone to HE double hockey sticks in a handbasket? So getting a gauge on what their relationship is to societal divisiveness, political polarization, how it's affecting the relationships with people that are close to them, how it's affecting their beliefs about whether they can have positive impact to turn things around. What those are great opening questions. And
so
also,
yeah.
what kinds of things are they doing to manage their stress? Because whatever they're doing to manage their stress falls far, 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 far short of what needs to be done in today's climate. And even most psychotherapists have no idea what really needs to be done above and beyond the usual run-of-the-mill stress management techniques.
Oh, pray tell, what might one of those things be?
Well, if it's okay with you, I'd like to actually defer to the American Psychological Association about this, because as a lot of people don't know, that the American Psychological Association has been tracking stress in the United States for a number of years through their Stress in America survey. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to
Yeah.
reveal what that survey has found, including what they have found that people are doing and not doing in managing their stress. Can I do that?
Please.
Yes, please do.
So the first thing they found is more than 6 in 10 Americans, 62% to be precise, report that the current political climate is a significant stressor for them. The second is that more than half of adults, 56%, say this is the lowest point in our nation's history in the United States, and I think that's true in a lot of other countries as well, that they can remember. The third is that when asked to consider the United States' future, because the American Psychological Association has been tracking stress specifically in the United States, more than 2/3 of Americans, 69% in fact, just shy of 70%, report that considering the nation's future causes them significant stress, and that's a significant increase over what they've been saying in the past. The percentage of people that have been feeling stressed about the nation's future. And the fourth is that what may contribute to many adults' stress about the future is that most Americans, 61% of them, disagree that the United States is on a path to being stronger than ever. In other words, it seems that the American Psychological Association itself has found incontrovertible evidence that there is a growing need for psychoeducational and psychotherapeutic resources to help consumers and clients deal with these stressors more effectively. But when the APA goes deeper, as they have in their Stress in America survey, they look at what people are trying to do to cope with the stress that they're experiencing. And it turns out that 12% are doing meditation or yoga, 29% are doing prayer, exercise or walking is being done by 46% to manage their stress, 47% are listening to music. And while these forms, and these are the most common forms of stress management that the public is using. And when these forms of self-care, even though they're undeniably useful, using them to control symptoms in place of empowering citizens to be socially responsible without sacrificing their personal well-being is arguably a harmful thing. So if we as therapists are not helping our clients develop skills above and beyond the typical stress management skills, we're actually feeding the problem of learned helplessness today rather than solving it. Underdeveloped psychological skills for addressing these issues of societal divisiveness and political polarization and media mind-jacking propaganda is a gap in the marketplace that mental health professionals are arguably best equipped to fill, but only once they know how to do that in unbiased, nonpartisan ways. And that's the training that I'm providing at the ACEP conference.
Wow. That sounds really fabulous. Really
Yeah,
good.
I want to be some of that.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to say. So perhaps you could say a little more about what some of those things, at least one of them might be, so people, again, for anyone listening to this podcast, it might help them directly, and for other therapists to begin to get a sense of what you're talking about, because I would imagine some people might already be feeling some learned helplessness, like, oh my God, this is more than I could possibly do.
Oh, everybody you talk to. And I would imagine, David, all the things you described are exacerbated now in an election year. We've got primaries coming up. Debates are on TV. I mean, I'm noticing a lot more people talking about it and being a lot more verbal about their angst.
Oh, no question about it. The impeachment escalated all of that, and now during the election cycle, it's going to get increasingly more and more insane. Yeah. I've distilled the psychological skills that helping professionals can provide their clients down into essentially 3 areas. And they have to do with locus of control, locus of power, and locus of interaction. So maybe we should unpack those one at a time.
I should say for those, I mean, I know you, and I'm going, okay, here we go. Here comes the Gruderization of things. You are so good at saying, there's three, I'm gonna give you the 3 areas, and then you go, there'll be 4 things in each area, and it's always like, damn, that's so good. So now I'm on pins and needles. So go ahead, let's hear what some of these things are, because again, that's one of, I think, your superpowers is you really come up with a way of going, yeah, there's 3 areas and there's 4 things, and then 4 of those things, there's 2 more, and you give people a roadmap so that they don't feel overwhelmed. Which I know, it's if you, I know the 3 steps to take. Okay, I can move now. If you don't know the 3 steps, it's just like, oh my God, there's all this stuff, and you just get paralyzed.
But I do want to remind you, David, we don't want to give away all the gold on this podcast.
He's got too much gold. Trust me. There's so much gold.
And we only have so much time for the gold. So.
Well, exactly. I can't possibly cover everything I'm going to be covering in a 6-hour training program in a half hour. So we don't have to worry about that.
Okay. Excellent.
And thanks, Bob, for saying what you're saying about that superpower of mine. I've been a curriculum developer since literally I was thrust into the deep end of the pool with that back in the beginning of 1972. So I do know very deeply how to harness the wild cats and and really turn them into practical structures. So what elevated locus of control has to do with is, people today generally have either an external locus of control or their locus of control is their inner critic. And they don't have a higher self locus of control. They aren't the boss of themselves. They are not self-sovereign. So we as helping professionals have the ability, once we have specific procedures that I'm going to be teaching in the program I'll be giving at ACEP, how to increase our clients' self-responsibility and how to give them freedom from the tyranny of their inner critic. Those are key pieces in elevating our locus of control. Locus of power, elevating locus of power. What locus of power is where does the power live? Is the power in other people's hands, in the hands of the powers that be, in the hands of outside circumstances, or is the power inside me? So this has to do with replacing susceptibility to media mind jacking, as I call it, propaganda, and learned helplessness and power phobia, because people are afraid of their own personal power because there are so many role models that demonstrate shadow power, evil forms of power, and they haven't been exposed to healthy power, so they think power is a bad thing, when it's actually a very important thing. And also replacing what I call impotent activism, which is activism that's protesting against something rather than advocating for the replacement of the problem. Replacing all of that with propaganda proofing and ethical personal power effectiveness. So that's elevated locus of power that I'm going to be teaching very specific skills that helping professionals can impart to their clients. And the third is locus of interaction. In our society, we are trained extensively in 2 out of the 3 forms of interaction that exist, but not the third one. The 2 of the 3 that we're trained in are coercion and compromise. The third is collaboration. And while more and more people actually say from their heart that they believe in collaboration, very few people that I've ever come in contact with in business, in politics, or in everyday life actually understand the nitty-gritty, step-by-step procedures that make collaboration successful. And without the skills, all that saying I believe in collaboration is a good intention. So elevated locus of interaction has to do with our locus of interaction becoming more and more collaborative rather than coercive or compromise oriented.
Oh, that's so good.
Those
So
are the three areas I'm going to be going into step-by-step skills and mindset shifts about
mhm.
during the training program.
So I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I know one of the personal struggles that I deal with these days is it's really hard to have what I would call a conversation, anything approaching a collaborative conversation when facts aren't facts, and there's just not even, you're not even talking about a shared perception of reality. And I think is one of the things that drives people absolutely bonkers. And which quickly, I know I can get, I mean, I'll either just disengage because like, why bother? Because we can't, or I can get, engaged in a way that's not helpful. So I'm curious if you have one, since being practiced, one suggestion you might have for me personally, or anybody else for that matter.
Yes, and I will give you one very concrete suggestion in a moment. What I want to say first is that I'm going to be covering that in great depth in the training program as well, because if we as helping professionals don't understand the dynamics of propaganda, of mind jacking, we cannot help our clients get free of that poison. And so there are very specific things that I'm going to be covering that give helping professionals the propaganda literacy that they need in order to help their clients with this. But going from there now into specifically answering your question, the linchpin, the key to having, and actually I'm going to say two linchpins that are the keys to having difficult conversations about touchy topics in good ways are, first of all, you got to vet teachability. You have to make sure that you're having a conversation with someone who is open to learning. Because if you're not, then you're just going to end up being a crusader trying to force a different set of beliefs down someone else's throat. And all you'll get in response to that is rebelliousness and venom and hatred and rupture in the relationship. But assuming there is some level of compassion, caring, love, and teachability, then that leads to the second key suggestion that I have, which is never get involved in a discussion or a debate or arm wrestling matches about positions. Positions are poison. Instead, go underneath positions to what I call the person's noble concerns and noble intentions rather, because underneath every position is a noble concern or a noble intention, something that we're worried about or a higher intention that we want to actualize. And when we get out of arm wrestling matches about positions and go to that level of sharing our respective noble concerns and noble intentions, magic happens. New solutions emerge that never would have emerged as long as we were arm wrestling between positions. That's my specific concrete suggestion. It's the linchpin to having difficult conversations about touchy topics in good ways. And I will be teaching people a very specific method for doing exactly that I call my reconciliation roadmap, which is part of what I'm going to be covering in my pre-conference workshop.
And this pre-conference workshop is 1 day, correct, David?
It's a 1-day pre-conference workshop, yes.
And I would like to say that you were my very first teacher in energy psychology, in the very first comprehensive energy psychology program. So I can say to everybody, this man is a great teacher. And when he says he's going to create a roadmap, you will get a roadmap. So I highly recommend that anybody dealing with these issues or even curious about them sign up for this workshop. But David, because we're coming toward the end of our time, I would like to ask you, in the real world, separate from the ACEP conference, who are you working with these days and what kind of work are you doing?
Well, my time is split among a number of different focuses. One is that I'm working very extensively with CEOs and executive teams and entrepreneurs in leader development, executive skills, and culture creation in businesses, helping, like you said at the beginning, helping make integrity profitable. The second focus of mine is working with entrepreneurs and particularly helping professionals, helping them become entrepreneurs, helping them fill in the business development gaps that they have, because there isn't enough time for people to learn those kinds of things while they're going through their training and becoming a therapist or a counselor or clergy or a coach or some other kind of helping professional. So for mental health professionals, I call that helping them become psychpreneurs. And the third area that I'm really focused on is very related to what we've been talking about today, which is societal repair. This is part of an initiative that I've launched called the Free Sponsibility movement or initiative. And free sponsibility is a word that I coined in one of my books a decade ago, that is the interweaving of freedom and responsibility, because freedom without responsibility is narcissism, yet responsibility without freedom is tyranny. And we don't get to be whole and complete as individuals or as a society unless we're living at the intersection of both responsibility and freedom.
You know, for whatever reason, I'm now flashing back to some of the stuff that you've talked about in your book,
The New IQ book?
Integrity Quotient. But one of the things you talked about back then was the idea of, you know, having a balance in between individual, corporate, the different levels. And we all, if you can be really doing great, I'm really responsible about in this area. I do all this great stuff. You know, at work, I give. Meanwhile, at home, the person's not taking care of their kids, not taking care of their relationship. Or it could be, oh, we make all this money for our company, and we're doing all this great stuff, and everyone's happy. The stockholders are happy. Meanwhile, they're polluting the rivers, and so you have to have everybody it has to all line up. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I mean, there's going to be a price to pay.
Absolutely. Integrity is three-dimensional. There's self-integrity, which is about me being my authentic self. There is relationship integrity, which is where what I say I'm going to do, I do. I'm a person of my word. And where I honor and nourish my cherished relationships. And there is collective integrity, which has to do with my integrity with whatever groups I'm a part of, whether it's a community group or a place of worship or a business or, God forbid, a society, integrity with a society, because these are related to our three core drives. Self-integrity is about authenticity, relationship integrity is about connection, and collective integrity is about impact, positive impact in whatever spheres of influence we're called to have positive impact in. People are not in full three-dimensional integrity if they're only paying attention to being in integrity with themselves, or they're only paying attention to their cherished relationships, or if they're only paying attention to doing good by their business. It's not enough anymore. We've got to integrate integrity in those three-dimensional areas.
I really love that concept, David, because it's sort of the antidote to compartmentalization, where, like, to take this to the extreme, in a TV show where the guy was in the mafia. He was a great dad and husband at home, but during the day he was, having people killed.
Exactly. Now, I have developed the third generation of the material that was in the New IQ book of mine that won 6 book awards. And now the third generation is an online comprehensive training program. That's pretty much do-it-yourself, called the Integrity Guide to Having It All, how to put your genius where your dreams are. So the next generation of that material you were just talking about, Bob, is now available in an online resource of mine.
Always a good thing online.
And
You
Bob,
know,
oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was just going to ask David to give his contact or website information, because I'm sure many people listening to you, David, are thinking, okay, how do I get him as a speaker, or how do I find this online training? How do I learn more?
Sure. So you can go to my main website, which is drgruder.com, drgruder.com. You'll also find a link to my podcast on that website, as well as my online courses. There's also a specific page for learning more about the pre-conference that I'm going to be giving at ACEP this year, and that's drgruder.com/ACEP 2020.
Great.
So
Great.
cool. Thanks, Dave. In the last few minutes, perhaps we could talk about one more thing that you mentioned to me the other day when we were talking. I think I was saying to you something like, oh God, it's such a, these times are so tough. It's so terrible, or whatever. So I was in a mood, and you kind of came back and said something to the effect of, what are you talking about? This is like the best. This is a great time, which, perhaps you could say a few words to people who are feeling one way or another that this is a terrible time. And according to the APA, it's more stressed than ever. Why is this an opportunity that they should, maybe, even though it's stressful, they can look at it a different way that might be empowering?
I'm delighted you asked about that, Bob. I've been ministering to people across the political spectrum since literally 10 p.m. on election night in 2016. Because of this very thing. Regardless of where people fall on the political spectrum, they're really wigged out about what's going on today. And my perspective is that throughout the history of societies and science, the biggest fear-fueled backlashes and regressivism always occur just before a huge breakthrough that's already underway fully takes hold. And so, we've talked, those of us, like the three of us who are baby boomers, well, Paula's ageless, she's still 26, but.
That's you, darling. I love you.
Oh man, stop sucking up. Stop sucking up. Unbelievable.
But
continue.
we baby boomers were told when we were teenagers that we were in the age of Aquarius, but that age of Aquarius is only beginning to move into full swing now. And really, from my perspective, nothing can stop it. The sky is not falling. We're simply in the recoiling before the breakthrough. Now, the thing that I want to add, though, is that doesn't mean that we should just sit back or stick our heads in the sand. It simply means that we can speak up and take action without panic, without attack, without rancor, and with love and confidence. And that's the key to being an effective activist in our time. Whereas what I see people doing is rebelling against with such venom and such anger and such hatred that they're actually making things worse rather than better.
Yes. Yes.
So,
it reminds me of that statement that Mother Teresa made when somebody asked her to march against something. And I can't remember her exact words, but basically what she said was, I have to be what I want to see in the world, and protesting is not the energy, that's going to reflect that.
Right. And Gandhi said, become the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, David, we could talk to you for days, and we look forward to being able to do that more at the ACEP conference. And for any of our viewers who don't know, the conference is May, Bob, 14th?
14th through 17th.
14th
2020 in Baltimore, Maryland.
In Baltimore, Maryland. And on what day will David's pre-con be? The 14th or the 13th?
Thursday, May 14th.
Okay, the 14th. So we look forward to that so much. I will be there early, and I can't wait to hear all that you have to say, David. And I also want to encourage our viewers to subscribe to the Higher Energy podcast, to review it and share it, because we want to spread all of this great information with as many people as possible. So there will be more people as fabulous as Dr. Gruder, who we've just spent time with today. And we just want to thank him again for some amazing information here. As always, David, when I'm in your presence, I learned some really cool stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. And as always, it's my pleasure to be with you, Paula and Bob.
And we look forward to all of you joining us again next week for the Higher Energy podcast.
Can't wait to see you all at the ACEP conference.
Yes.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.